Brownstone in a podcast where we talk to entrepreneurs, artists, creators, technologists about their work, about how they shake things up. We delve into their stories to inspire you, but also obviously to help you out on your own journey. Today, our guest has a pretty remarkable track record. He's developed smart fabrics that help athletes improve their performance, can treat chronic diseases, and could even save you from a heart attack. Timothy Brownstone is founder and CEO of UK-based Kymira, a smart fabric and wearable technology company. Their products react and interact with the human body to convert heat into energy and information. This helps enhance the performance of athletes, aid circulation, accelerate recovery, and monitor and report on human well-being. So without further ado, here's our very interesting conversation with Tim Brownstone. All right, Tim, how's it going?
I'm doing very well, thank you. The sun is shining here in the UK, so everybody's in a good mood.
Okay.
How about yourself?
Well, it's the sun is not shining in Berlin, but thanks for asking. Thanks for being with us. Listen, we will get started with an easy question. I'd like you to tell us a bit about Kymira, what products you're offering, and how they differ a bit from what's currently out there on the market.
Yeah, so broadly speaking, Kymira is a smart textiles company. So in layman's terms, we do clever things with different fabrics and components of fabrics. And the products that we offer vary from predominantly sporting through to medical applications of the technologies that we're developing, which range from performance and recovery enhancement through to some more sort of interesting and potentially life-saving technologies on the medical side.
Great. And I've read that you have a bachelor's in animal sciences and then you focus on photobiology. So first question, before we really get into the technology and the company, first of all, what is a photobiologist and how does a photobiologist become a sport tech innovator?
So a photobiologist is basically a term to describe a biologist who is using different wavelengths of light to cause effects on biological matter. So in terms of my academic background, I was using the infrared light that you'll see in some of our products, looking into how I could accelerate wound healing, which was my biological side. And the reason that I ended up taking a degree in animal sciences was to do that research as an undergraduate level here in the UK, the only degree in the entire country that I could take, and it was also specific to the University of Reading, was animal science, because it gave me the freedom basically to choose my own subject and research topic versus having one that was from a list that was of interest to the university and school.
Great. And what triggered that idea of launching Kymira? What was the trigger?
So it was something that really spanned sort of 5-6 years if you trace it back to kind of the full origin story. So it started back when I was at sixth form, which for those that aren't in the UK, that's ages between 16 and 18 years old. And at that point in time, I was just breaking into the international sprinting scene. In fact, my first international competition was in Germany, and I had sustained quite a serious knee injury, which had basically set back my entire season was kind of gone out the window. So I'd started looking into ways that I could find to accelerate my rehabilitation. I started looking into compression, and the literature wasn't. It was too drawn out in the fact that one paper would say that there was a good effect of compression, and another paper would say there was no effect. And eventually, I came across this NASA research paper where they were using infrared light to make plants grow quicker in space by accelerating their cell growth. And I thought to myself, as at that point, biochemist, wow, if you can accelerate how quickly plants grow, maybe we can do the same with human and animal cells, and consequently we can heal wounds quicker. And for me at the time, I can recover quicker from my knee injury. So that kind of gave a personal incentive and then sort of kind of like my academic narrative. So then, I was interested in it. As I mentioned, I went in to then study that at university. And what then ended up being Kymira was the fact that I was coming up to graduating. The technology was, in essence, it was developed, but I still couldn't release it as a wound dressing to really help the people that I wanted to help, because I had to have it medically certified. And if anyone's ever looked into the cost of sort of medical certification, I was estimating that it was going to take £1.5 million just to pay for all of that clinical research. And I don't know many students that have that kind of money at their disposal. So Kymira came about basically because I sort of said to myself, right, I actually had a PhD offer, but I still had to find less funding, but still had to find grant funding to support that. How else could I do this? I knew that there were applications in the sports market based on my athletic career. And so I came up with sort of the notion that what if I could set up a sportswear brand where I don't need to have all of the regulated certification, because there was still research done. It hadn't ticked all the right boxes to get a certificate. What if that sportswear brand could basically fund the subsequent medical certification and development? And so fast forward 6 years, and that's exactly what we've done at Kymira. All of our infrared products are now medically certified in Europe and the US, and they're now starting to really go on and impact people and help them, as well as just improve and elongate athletic careers. And behind the scenes, which we'll discuss, I'm sure, a bit later, we're then now repeating that with our new technologies that are coming through from our sort of R&D department.
Great. So basically getting into the sportswear industry was a pragmatic way for you to, to achieve what you wanted to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a much more concise way of describing it, but yes, exactly that.
Great. So you will be coming to Berlin to speak at the Wear It Innovation Summit, which will be happening on June 25th and 26th. Could you tell us a bit about what you guys are doing in terms of sportswear?
So in terms of the sportswear that we'll have on demo there, we're going to have basically our full spectrum. So the current products that you can buy, and there'll be some previews of stuff that will be coming out in a year or two's time. But in essence, that will be built around our infrared technology. So that is different from other products on the market because it basically captures wasted light from the environment, wasted energy from the body, converts into a very narrow spectrum of infrared light, and then puts that back into your muscles, which in essence kind of supercharges your cells and allows you to improve performance, accelerate recovery, and importantly, this is something that we've started focusing on more recently, is reduce injury occurrence. Because it's all well and good giving an athlete an extra gear, but if they end up breaking sooner, then it's counterintuitive. So a big thing from our end is that holistic approach of it's not just for performance, it's not just for recovery. By combining both of them, then you get to sort of have the best of both worlds. Then in addition to that, we'll also have it'll be the first time it's been shown in Europe actually, some of our latest technologies coming through, which are featuring biosensors on top of the infrared technology. So we'll have an ECG demo there, which will be giving, I think in Germany you actually say EKG like they do in the US. So one of us on the stand, you'll be able to see our EKG all day, every day, in real time, and not just when our heart's beating, but which chamber of our heart is beating, when it's beating. If we have any issues, the system would flag that. So you'll get a glimpse at sort of what's here now and then what's coming in the future under both Kymira Sport and Kymira Medical. Okay.
So you basically have this collection of sportswear. We're talking leggings, hoodies, and socks?
Yeah, so these days it covers every inch of your body. So different variants of socks, full-length leggings, three-quarter-length leggings, shorts, different types of tops in terms of both different fits of base layer, because people's bodies aren't the same shape, and then also some of our now mid layers that we've moved into, and some of our newer products. But basically we're expanding from just kind of the stuff that goes as the base layer, the inner layers, into some of the outer layers as well, which is it's really just indicative of our position as a company as we've grown and our resources have grown to cater for everything, to have a larger warehouse just to store everything. We've been expanding our range over the last 12 months to include some of those outer garments as well.
Okay, and if we just simplify things a little bit for the people listening to us who don't know anything about wearable and technology and smart fabrics. So you basically offer this sportswear, and the people wearing it will benefit from the technology by what exactly? Just to, I know you've kind of covered that, but I just want to make sure that the people listening to us don't get lost in the tech.
Yeah, so if we broadly define infrared as passive, and then when we discuss the newer stuff, we'll call that an active smart textile. So focusing in on the infrared now, as I said, the three summary terms are performance enhancement, recovery enhancement or acceleration, and injury reduction. In terms of how that's actually happening, in essence, the fabrics convert wasted energy into infrared light. That then penetrates roughly 4 centimeters into your body, and that basically induces a number of biochemical reactions which vary from increases in circulation, reduced pain levels, muscle suppleness and flexibility will be improved, athletic endurance is increased. And so all of this these days is now, we have independent clinical trials to back it up, as well as just tons of anecdotal evidence from customers. So in a nutshell, it enables your body to have an extra gear and work more efficiently versus if you were training without it.
Great, that's pretty cool. And who are you targeting with this? Is this like a mass market type of product, or you're targeting more, high performance type of athletes?
So I mean, there's really no reason why it can't be mass, other than the fact that we as a small company need to be focused with who we're targeting. So broadly we target three sections. We have the elite athletes, which are basically your professionals, your Olympians, etc. Then we have the sub-elites. So that's someone who may be working full time but is training 5-6 times a week, and they're competing, seriously, every weekend sort of thing. And then we have we say the top 10% of the enthusiast market. So that would include, for example, we're going to marathon season. So that's including people who they have no intention of it being something that they make a career out of, but it's a lifestyle choice. But they're doing it. They're still training 3-4 times a week at least. And actually the people that you can see the biggest benefits in terms of percentage improvements from are those enthusiasts versus the elite athletes. Because if you think about it, the elite athletes, while 100th of a second might mean more to them, they're closer to their physical absolute than what the athlete who's training 2-3 times a week and is doing it as a lifestyle choice is. And so by bringing in our technology and our products, we'll, in terms of percentage differences, we'll see far bigger and quicker improvements with our the more mass end of the market than we will do straight away with the elite end. The appreciation of it may be different, but in terms of the pure metrics, if we want to put out marketing statistics, then it's actually the mass market where we'd see those larger improvements coming from.
Okay, so you're saying that the husband and father of two like me who goes to the gym 3 to 4 times a week would also benefit from sportswear like the ones you're offering?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll start with a question that we ask many of our customers. Do you get delayed onset muscle soreness, aches and pains after you've done a heavy session in the gym?
Of course.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that regardless of whether you're an Olympian or you're someone like yourself, that you're going to see a big drastic reduction in. So we have customers who have written reviews on our website basically detailing how they tried to get into different types of sport over the years, and they always stopped because the delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMS, basically put them off and gave them a reason not to go and train. With our products and the pain alleviating effects and some of the ongoing research, we're actually looking into exercise-induced muscle damage differences, we consistently see reduction in those pain levels. So even if you're not benefiting in terms of your performance statistics because you're not pushing to your absolute to get those big improvements, at very least you're going to be more comfortable, which is then likely to make you want to train more. Because if you're not hurting as much, you'll think, oh, okay, I'll put in an extra 10%. And then that extra 10% leads to you actually realizing, oh, actually, I'm getting quite competitive here. Maybe I'll do a few more competitions. Or likewise, because you're putting in that extra 10, 20% each session, you're losing weight quicker, which means either, great, I can eat more, which is probably more likely to be my answer, or it means, fantastic, I'm losing the weight, so I'm now more motivated to go off and, keep that weight loss going until I get to my goal. Mm-hmm. So yeah, someone such as yourself, father of two, you really can benefit from the technology just as much, albeit in maybe different ways, as someone who's wearing it to help them win a medal at the Olympics.
So you might have won your next customer.
I'm pleased to hear it.
All right. So you started with sportswear, as you explained earlier, but you're also, as you mentioned, briefly exploring medical applications. What are you working on, or what you're offering at the moment?
So within the passive side, so again, sticking with the infrared, right now we're basically taking that same technology and saying, okay, how can that help people beyond, say, just a sporting application? So for the last 6 years, while they've been purchasing either through the sportswear website or from, for example, physiotherapists and chiropractors that stock our products, we've been helping on the medical side. We've let it grow organically, but that's going to be a change that you'll see by the time we come out to Berlin. In that the Kymira medical brand will actually be something that there is a dedicated website you can go on and you can purchase products through. So we're predominantly going to be focusing on chronic illnesses or diseases. So that will be chronic pain, which will be things like fibromyalgia, arthritis, for example, circulatory disorders, which are going to be looking at things like, again, arthritis to reduce swelling, things like Raynaud's disease, which is poor circulation in the extremities. There'll be a travel section on there, which is in essence going to be your flight socks, but detailing why are our Kymira socks better than something that you might have already or other people's flight socks. And then finally there'll be a rehab section, which will cover a bit of a grey area between the sports and the medical, because if you've got a bad sporting injury, then technically you're still going through a medical rehabilitation process. But also things like post-surgical rehab, so helping people to get back on their feet quicker after they've had an operation, which has meant that they have to, either lay off the gas in terms of their training, or simply that, perhaps they're someone who's 80, 90 years old, they've had an operation, and statistically they're more likely to recover if they do some form of rehabilitation, but again, they're going to struggle with it. So we see through our physiotherapists especially, we've been seeing our technology going in and helping people that have had a stroke, for example, and during their rehabilitation, they've been accelerating that process by working with our products. So that's what you're going to see in the short term. And then longer term, as I defined earlier, that's when we start moving into the active side, whereby we're actually building sensors with our new wave of smart textiles and combining the two. So you'll have for example, your infrared base layer with our EKG sensors and then the software layer of the top of that. And the goal there is that on a medical aspect, we're able to detect a heart attack 2 days before it happens. So we can call for an intervention and it gets prevented from happening versus treating the acute event. It's far better for the patient. It's far cheaper for the healthcare system. And ultimately everyone benefits from that. But as a medically certified product, as I'm sure you would have guessed from the nature of our business, we're not going to see that as the medical device for 3 to 5 years from now. So in the meantime, you'll see releases coming out through the sportswear brand, which admittedly that will be more on your elite athlete side, because you don't necessarily need that level of accuracy if you're just training 2-3 times a week and you're not tracking EKG. Quite often, heart rate might be enough. But you'll see some basically sportswear and consumer releases of those technologies coming out in the meantime as well.
Wow, that's really cool. I've also read somewhere that you had the British Special Forces as customers, or military applications, or even space exploration in your cards.
Yeah, so space is one that's very dear to my heart, just because I'm a nerd and it's really fun. So we have a little internal bet with the team member that works most closely with me on the space stuff as to which one of us gets to go to space first. But in essence, we're predominantly at the moment looking into muscle wastage. So we've done the desktop research that shows that our infrared technology should be able to reduce the amount of muscle wastage that an astronaut will experience when they're in micro or zero gravity. It's something that from our side makes a lot of sense, because they don't need to change anything other than they swap out one shirt that they're wearing now with a shirt that's got our technology in it, and then they get that benefit with no change in routine. But that's something that we need to actually put to the test in zero gravity on the International Space Station, which of course doesn't come without its hurdles to overcome. And then when it comes to the military side, yes, it's not sadly it's not a official deal with the special forces, but we've had procurement from individuals and squads within the special forces within the British military, whom have taken it out to lots of different parts of the world, which of course I'm told that I can't know where it's going necessarily, because of by the nature of who we're dealing with, and that's confidential information. But with those guys, we have seen it going out to deserts in the Middle East when they've been delivering training sessions. We've seen them going out with personal use. For example, if they're going out on an expedition outside of their military practice, that they've gone out to places like the Bornean rainforest, up to the Arctic Circle. And so it's been fantastic from us, because as well as just having an interesting application, the reason that they've been taking them on those journeys is, for example, when you're going and crossing an entire country on foot, you want your pack to be as small as possible. And so in examples like I think it was Borneo, the difference between the tropical temperatures in the rainforest and the temperatures at the top of some of the mountain peaks that they had to go over could be 20-30 degrees difference, and they basically needed a garment that could handle both climates comfortably, rather than them needing to take unique kit for the same island but the varying climates within that island. And that's where fortunately our technology came in and trumped the others, because we were able to handle those versatilities in the environment and give the wearer exactly what they needed based on how the technology is adapting to those needs.
So we've talked about military applications, space exploration, sports. We've talked about rehabilitation, treatment of chronic diseases. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for Kymira specifically, but also where you see things going in terms of wearable technology for the next few years?
So I think really as the level of accuracy, both in terms of the data collection, so the sensors themselves, but then also the software layers over the top of them, I think the focal point it's already been shifting, not just with ours, but to those medical applications. And when we're talking about wearable tech, the medical field is somewhere that's really lagged behind, for example, the sports and the general lifestyle areas, for very obvious reasons. You haven't had the level of accuracy that's required, or simple things like batteries don't last long enough to be practical. So very much where we see ourselves in that industry is not just in developing some really market-leading, innovating products ourselves, but also allowing our technologies to be a platform that can enable other projects to build out. Because ultimately, as a company, one of the big things that we measure ourselves against is the impact of our technologies and our products. So if we kept everything to ourselves, okay, sure, we're going to have impact. We'll save lives with our heart attack detection. But if we can be the thing that underpins 10 projects that go in and save lives, then the impact of our technology is exponentially increasing. And so, as I say, for us internally, that's a big motivator: is how many people can we help? But then, in terms of where the industry is going as well, wearable tech is growing, and we're sort of really in that sort of hockey stick where we're starting to see the industry start to mature. But one of the fastest growing areas within that is going to be the smart garment side. And for us, there are a number of reasons. You could argue, or you would say this, because you make smart garments, not smart watches. But right now there is an advantage to having a smart watch over a smart garment, in the sense that the smart garments, you'll wear the same watch every day of the week, whereas you're not likely to wear the same T-shirt, and the cost to get a really great smart garment hasn't come down to be quite cheap enough yet to say, okay, well, you'd have 5 in your wardrobe. But as we get close to that point of sort of ubiquitous or mass adoption, the versatility that you can get from a sort of a fabric-based garment, in terms of you've got a much larger surface area, so you can build more sensors into it. You can perhaps build in energy harvesting technologies so that you can power the devices, or at least you can extend their operational lifetime. These are all really key things that, when you're looking into the medical side, are going to be a very big factor for the next 30 years or so. And the reason I say that is that one of the biggest areas of impact, both in our opinion and if you look into some of the market reports, is in domestic healthcare. So typically speaking, the demographics we're looking at there are going to be your 60 plus, but the majority of that population is likely to be 80 plus. They're going to be infirm for some reason or another, whether that's physically or mentally. And as such, they're not used to charging a smartphone or a smartwatch every day of the week. They don't want to charge it every day of the week. So you've got your barriers there, because you've got people not wanting to interact with that technology, and they don't understand how to interact with it, perhaps, because while a 6-year-old might pick it up and start working with it straight away, that 6-year-old is growing up with the technology in their lives. Even myself, I've grown up with the invention of smartphones. And so for the next 30 years, we're not going to see digital natives at that key demographic, which means that the providers of the technology need to make them as simple to use as possible. And, in our terms, there's nothing simpler than just getting dressed. So that's the real key thing for us. And I think what we're seeing in terms of trends in the industry is that big growth in the smart garment section of the wearable technology market, because if you're able to remove those barriers to entry and make it as something that's such a simple task, then you're more likely to be able to get the technology in and helping the people that it needs to help with minimal disruption to their daily routines.
Mm-hmm. And maybe a quick question just before we move to another topic. With any new technology, sometimes there is a downside to it. If you take 3D printing, for instance, there's a potential to create and produce lots of waste. When we think about smart fabrics and wearable technology, there's also a potential environmental cost to it. How do you see this on your end?
So again, like most of the things that we do at Kymira, we're looking at things very holistically and at the full system. So, for example, if you want to embed your technologies inside a yarn or a fiber, so rather than printing it onto the fabric, but actually having it there so that it can be washed 1,000,000 times and it's not going to make any damage, there won't be any damaging effects. That means you have to be working with a synthetic yarn, because you need to bring it down to a molten level and then have the electronic components put inside it, or some other form of mechanism that the industry is starting to now get to in terms of the electronic side. Just working with synthetics is not necessarily a bad thing. So, for example, we work with as much recycled polyester as possible. So if we're able to reduce ocean waste, for example, the Adidas sneakers have been getting a lot of press that they're made entirely out of ocean plastics. That, whether that's greenwashing or whether that's, it's a very noble enterprise, regardless, it's going to have a positive impact. and provided that you're looking at the full chain. So what happens to that garment once it's done, or how long is the expected lifetime of that garment? If we're talking about a Nike product, then 50 washes is the expected lifetime, which, if you ask me, is nowhere near long enough. We might have someone that washes a garment 3 to 5 times a week. 10 weeks is not an expected lifetime for one of our products. We're looking for a minimum of 24 months. And by extending those expectations on what we produce, so that, for example, if we only have someone replacing a garment every 2 years versus every 6 months, for argument's sake, then we're reducing our impact by 75% straight away, by working with our factories to ensure that those in our supply chain are sourced as locally as possible. So, for example, 95% of our range is made here in the UK right now, and the remainder is almost entirely made in Europe. The only thing that we don't make in Europe is our gloves. And then those that are outside of Europe, we've specifically worked with them because they share the same ethos that we do in terms of being as sustainable as possible, making sure that it's not just about the factories themselves, but typically they'll be reinvesting in community interest projects. And so I say, looking at the system as a whole rather than just focusing on one component of it, I think is going to be essential regardless of what new technology you're developing. And then making sure that when we are going through our development processes, we are demanding of ourselves to maintain that integrity that we currently have. It's easy to say, okay, well, that's going to save me 10 cents per meter of fabric, so we'll make that sacrifice. Well, actually, no, we're not a bargain bin product. We are a premium product. So we will not say no to that. We'll say, yes, we'll take that 10 cents hit because it's important to us and that's who we are. Unfortunately, not every brand thinks like that. But, there is an increasing amount of companies these days who are taking that approach, and only good things can come from that sort of mindset.
I'd like to finish the interview with a portion more focused on the company's beginnings and growth and development. So talk more about let's say the business side of the endeavor. Mm-hmm. So you did your research, you developed the technology.
Yep.
You briefly talked about how you got started and what the angle you took, but could you tell me a bit, maybe a bit more granular or more concretely, what are the steps that you follow to really be able to turn that idea into business? When you said, okay, let's create the business, what was your plan?
Oh, I mean, if you're comparing me then to me now, it's going to be two very different answers. So I would almost say that while there was a bit of a plan in place, it kind of happened not quite by accident, but there was no intention until there was an intention for me to become an entrepreneur, for me to set up a business. When it did happen, though, for me, it was, and I advise anyone that's starting out, you'll hear the term bootstrap being bandied about. Essentially, we made every penny count, or back in those days, I made every penny count. And I think that's a really important business practice for any entrepreneur, that's especially a first-time entrepreneur, because it teaches you how to spend money and how to spend money well. So in my instance, my seed capital, using sort of industry terminology, was the final installment of my student loan.
Great.
Yeah. And I didn't spend it all at once. It was only £2,000 because it was kind of the one that paid for my fuel money and my food. And so the first thing I did, I believe, was I just went out and I started calling people who might one day become customers. And I would brief them. I'd explain, look, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just want to get your idea on this. And typically, if you're just asking for a bit of someone's time, most people are generous and they're happy to give you some feedback. So all I was looking at that point was validation. That idea sounds like something that's sensible. Once I then got that validation, I said, okay, well, maybe there's something to this plan. And so then I went and just then it came to, well, what am I going to call this project? So for me, Kymira came to me one evening as I was brushing my teeth. And originally it was just going to be the name of a pair of leggings, and I woke up the next morning and I thought, no, actually that's quite cool. I went out and I kind of did a small isolated market test. So maybe I spoke to 100, 250 people during the day, and everybody came back saying, yeah, actually, Kymira is cool, it's punchy. So then I had my company name, so then I could go and get some business cards, and I could go and spend another £10 in registering for an email address. And so it was small incremental movements that basically just nudged my progress forwards. And bear in mind, this is while I'm finishing off writing my dissertation thesis, and about to start revising for my exam. So I didn't have a huge amount of spare time, even if I had the cash. And then the next step from there was, because I already had the technology developed, I suppose that was a bit of a blessing in disguise. So all I had to do was then turn it into a fabric. So the first order of fabric arrived. I'd already identified a factory in the UK based up in a town called Halifax. It was sort of open to work with me and teach me the areas that I didn't know, because I was a biologist. I didn't know anything about making fabrics, about making garments. So I learned all that. That was a very steep learning curve. And then I'll remember it to this day. It's a retailer called Biosynergy, and they turned up for the meeting about 2 hours after the sample was finished. So the garment arrived from the factory with no branding on it. I went to the local printers, came back to the university, and basically went almost straight into preparing for this meeting and then sitting down with this potential buyer, who again, they were someone who had been more willing with their time. So I'd invited them to be one of the first people to see the product. And then they did take it on and start selling it in low volumes. And it just built up from there. So I was recycling money in, and sort of customer funding as much as possible.
And you, excuse me, you didn't have any co-founder, or you?
No. If I ever said we back then, the we meant me and the dog. It was. I'll be honest. If I did anything again, I would have a co-founder, because it was really lonely. Now we have a team, and I'm very proud of the team that we have at Kymira. But one of the nicest things for me is just sharing the load a little bit. So yeah, no, it was just me on my own, and for the first 6 months of the company's lifetime, it was basically just in the evenings doing kind of the infrastructure work, getting the early supply chain established. And then it wasn't until September that I sort of went full time with it. And we started getting our first web sales, and it very quickly, it went very broad very quickly. So I woke up within the first week or two, I think it was, to an email from a potential customer in Saudi Arabia. Will I get too hot in the leggings, in the desert wearing your leggings? And I'm thinking, how on earth has this guy heard of us in Saudi Arabia when we've had one piece of press coverage in the UK? Yeah. But he ordered, and people say, oh, I'm scared to export. What made you do it? Well, a customer placed an order through the website. I hadn't been sensible enough to say I'm only selling in the UK, and so I had to fulfill that order. I'm going to do right by the customers. Yeah. And so a lot of the early stuff, we kind of I fell into out of naivety, if anything. I'd love to take more credit for it, but it kind of just happened. These days with the new technologies, or if we're looking specifically at the Kymira medical brand, the team is now bigger. So we've just hired employee number 11, and we're about to hire employee number 12, which is broadly split. About a third of the staff are in the R&D side, and then the remainder are either marketing or sales, and then you've got currently myself and my CTO, who then do sort of the operational roles. So how we do things now is obviously got a lot more planning to it, because we have we have more advisors, and we have more of an infrastructure to do the plan, and B, just we have more experience. I remember telling my father when I placed my first fabric order, I was stood in my parents' kitchen, and I remember saying, I've spent my £12,000 here to do to buy the fabric. I'll spend another £5,000 to start converting that fabric into garments, and once I've sold everything, I'm going to have £45,000 profit. And of course, I hadn't factored in the fact that it wasn't going to sell overnight, that there were going to be overheads to pay in the meantime. Which I now look back on and I laugh about how silly that seems, but I was a completely inexperienced individual back then, and I didn't know better.
Yeah, you probably did not calculate in that equation your salary, right?
Exactly. I don't think salary really started coming into it for probably 2.5 years, and I think it was actually when we first took some investment to accelerate the new research and invest. Of course, I thought to myself, oh, wouldn't it be nice if I could start paying myself a proper wage as part of this investment? But I'm thinking, well, investors not going to want to just give me money for me to take it out myself. When actually it was the opposite. They said to me, well, actually, we've known you for 2 or 3 hours, and you've done enough to make us believe in the vision that you're presenting and trust you to get to this point. But we need to be certain that you're not going to get a better offer and leave and go elsewhere, which, now 2-3 years later, depending on who the investor is, they'll tell you, well, that was a bit of a silly thing to think because we know Tim wouldn't do that. And in fact, I turned down a job offer for a very large 6-figure sum a couple of weeks back to leave Kymira, because, and I'm not going to do that because we've set out on our path and we have our mission, and I want to see that through, at very least through to the current level of completion. But yeah, as I say, it's not something that a lot of entrepreneurs consider in those early days. I think if you've got dependents, then you're probably more aware of it, because obviously you need to have that income stream to pay for a mortgage, buy food for the family. Ultimately, I had one dependent who was my horse, and if I hadn't had any money, then, to be quite honest, I'm sure my parents would have helped out with the horse, at least, if I needed it. So it was a really good time for me to start a company, because it didn't really matter if it went wrong in the early days.
And so you have an online shop, kymirasport.com. I believe you have also some retail partners. What's the distribution strategy for you?
So predominantly our growth over the last few years has been selling directly into professional teams and colleges, for example. So that's easier from our sense, because while we're treating it as a business-to-business transaction and there will be a sort of volumetric discounts applied, ultimately it's going straight to the end user. It's becoming more of a focal point for us now, especially here in Europe, looking for either distributors or retailers. And those retailers cross multiple different sectors. So most of our physical retailers are the physiotherapists, the chiropractors, and we have a few, for example, cycling and triathlon stores that are growing up quite nicely. Then we have some online retail. So we have an obstacle course racing kit provider that retails our products. We've got a couple of high-end running websites, both in the UK and dotted across Europe, which are helping us obviously grow our presence. And as our early customers, we're doing everything we can to support those guys, whether it be the retailer out in Slovakia or it be the company that's a 15-minute bike ride from where our office is here in Reading.
And is there you mentioned just before that a big chunk of the sales would come from direct sales. So there are plenty of wearable tech companies out there, some with let's say more credibility than others. And I'm sure you've met your fair share of skeptics, when you've presented your product. So what did you do, or what do you do to convince and win new customers?
So, I mean, we approach this very simply as we're largely a team of scientists and engineers. So we know in terms of our personal integrity, we're not going to go out and make something that we can't justify. So, for example, if someone wants to question the efficacy of our infrared technology, then good, you shouldn't just accept a list of bullet points that you see on the marketing material. But if you want to question it or challenge it, then we have 10 published clinical trials that we can send through, and a ton of background and supporting research that is done on the same frequency of infrared light, or has been applied in a slightly different way using our technology that's not sports. So we can metaphorically, it's all sat there in a cloud drive, but we'll share the link with you, and you've got, if you're going straight the way through it, probably 2 days worth of reading there. If you're going to do it in a bit more of a digestible fashion, then there's probably a good week's worth of research there for you to digest. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence now from our customers, because one of the important things that we hear, especially from the professional teams here in the UK, is, okay, we accept the science because we've either been recommended your products or we've already tested them, but are our players going to like wearing it? Is it comfortable? Can you handle orders of our size? So all of a sudden the conversation changed from them being skeptics of the technology to being skeptics of the fact we're a small company. Logistically, do we have the structure in place? And the answer to all of it comes down to, well, we prove that in our actions. So if it's the technology's sake, well, here's the research. Or in terms of the new tech, well, okay, I'm wearing the EKG top now. We'll log into our online portal and you can look at the data yourself. What do you think that looks like? And then you see the jaws drop of the cardiologist, and they're thinking, how on earth are you getting something more accurate from your t-shirt than the gold standard medical device that's costing us multiple thousands of pounds? So yeah, when it comes to skeptics, I love them because you should ask questions, and I love them because everything that we say and do, we can justify and we can prove. So ultimately those skeptics become our strongest advocates, because we've explained in a logical or a scientific manner, and we've given them the proof that they want to see, and then they'll go on and become advocates for us and tell more people.
Mm-hmm. And I had a look at some of your videos on YouTube earlier this week, and there's a lot of pretty cool things that you guys have put together to convince some customers. So I've encouraged people to have a look. A few more questions before I let you go. I don't want to take too much of your time. Very quickly, you have a brand athlete program, I believe.
Yes.
Is there any other discussions with bigger players like I don't know, Nike or Adidas or anybody else? Is this something that you would consider as well? Like one of the questions I always like to ask is, for somebody like you, what's your end game for Kymira, right? Where do you see things, or where do you want Kymira to go in the next a few years?
Yeah, so when it comes down to the big guys, or any essentially a licensing opportunity, it depends on the technology entirely. So those that we see as enabling technologies for the industry as a whole, that's where we're looking to do more collaborative work. And in areas where it gives us a really unique advantage but isn't essential to move the actual industry forwards, those are ones that we're more likely to, at least in the shorter term, so the next 5 years or so, keep internally for us, unless it's something that we just can't refuse. With the likes of the big brands, so your Nike, your Adidas, Puma, those guys, by all means, if they're interested to work with us, then especially with our new technologies, then there's something that we can do. Nike have actually been investing a lot in terms of developing some interesting technologies, which is predominantly built around footwear.
Yep.
So in terms of step counting, there've been some energy harvesting patents that they've been filing. In fact, the largest two corporations for filing wearable energy harvesting patents over the last 12 months were Nike and Samsung. So Nike in their trainers, Samsung in things like phone cases, which is quite interesting when you think of it from an industry perspective. So yeah, if they're listening, then we are open, and we're likely on at least their innovation team's radars. But it will come down to ultimately what sort of technology. And then in terms of the end goal for us, when I started Kymira, it genuinely was with the noblest of intentions. It was just I wanted to find a mechanism to get that first technology into the hands of people that it was really going to help. And while that has evolved to be a bit more appreciative of real life in the sense that we are a for-profit business, we have salaries to pay, etc. Ultimately, that is still the goal. So we do have investors, and I do have a duty to provide them with a return on that investment that they've made, and I want to do so because they took, especially the early investors, they took a risk in backing me. But the likelihood is that it's more likely to be that Kymira will, for the next sort of 7 to 8 years, you'll see us growing, maintaining as a private company, and we'll look for strategic investment. So, a larger company coming in and potentially buying a large equity stake, but it's not an entire merger and acquisition sort of deal that goes through. And they have to be strategically viable for us and for that long-term vision. So it would be more likely, if we were to take that sort of large strategic investment, that it come from one of the larger medical orientated companies versus one of the sportswear brands. It's not to say that it absolutely wouldn't be the sportswear brand, but if it is going to be, for example, Adidas, then they're going to have to prove to us that their intention, once they've made that investment, is to support us in distributing and developing that medical technology, as well as just bringing, for example, buying some of our technologies to feature in their own range, or to take them off the market entirely.
And, we've been talking for a while now, and you're covering a lot of different sectors and industries and applications. Like, you're a small company. I don't know if you know, there's a good book by Peter Lynch, a pretty good investor in the late 80s and 90s. One of his saying was that he called it diversification, right? Companies have this tendency to try to do everything. Like, you're a small company. How do you prioritize? You won't necessarily be able to be offering state-of-the-art technology for all of these industries. So what's the strategy there?
So our number one and number two priorities are Kymira Sport and Kymira Medical. So those two industries work very nicely together because you're ultimately looking at similar metrics and similar effects. It's just that for the medical side, they need to be that much more accurate and maybe that much more powerful. But the thing that we're very lucky with, which is certainly not something that I initially thought of before the company was started, compared to a lot of other industries, is that the method that you make clothing, whether it be for an athlete, it be for an astronaut, or it be for an old woman, fundamentally doesn't differ very much. So while advances have been made in terms of automation and the speed of manufacture, you're still doing more or less the same thing, just better, that was happening hundreds of years ago. And so the nice opportunity that gives us here is that if you look into our sort of our business model, the horizontal is the smart garment, and that smart garment can be applied into any number of smart fabrics, and those smart fabrics can be applied into any number of smart garments. So we basically treat it as our main focal points are, as I say, medicine and sports. But if we get the commitment from an order coming from the military side, and there is a small amount of refinement that needs to happen, i.e. the color of the fabric changes or the cut of the garment is slightly different, those are things that take one meeting and maybe a few days to a couple of weeks to turn around and give the next iteration of that product back to be retested. So we manage ourselves by not overcommitting on our end too soon. So in the example of the space sector, as I said, that's something that's really fun. So for the last 4 or 5 years, because I'm interested in space, I've been attending meetups that have been either with the UK or the European Space Agencies, going to lecture series and just getting to know people in the industry. And that then culminated in actually next Monday, we start our first European Space Agency funded contract. So it took 4 years to get there. We haven't hired anyone new. We're not really doing anything that we wouldn't be doing anyway in terms of under that contract. So our internal resources allowed us to hire new people. And, it's not to say that their support is not needed. Of course, it's helping us accelerate the project. And that will then get us there to that medical goal quicker. But the key thing is that we knew what we needed to do to make the acceleration and growth for the space sector, but we didn't actually have to commit to it until we had the client committing to us. And so I give the example that we stay in a perpetual state of readiness. We know what we need to do to take advantage of an opportunity, but we don't start developing out that infrastructure in its entirety until the client is ready for us, which sometimes it's just it's where the industry is. It has to be the right time for them to be accepting that what we're saying is possible. Sometimes being the first person to do it is the best thing. But by us just knowing what our requirements are, so with the European Space Agency project, we knew we needed an extra 2 engineers to be able to deliver that project. Great. We knew that. We applied to them with them knowing we didn't currently have them, but we knew who we wanted to hire. And then once they committed to the project, we committed to hiring those engineers. And as I say, they start next Monday.
So basically you're saying that in terms of product and tech development, whether you focus on sportswear or medical, that this is not where let's say the obstacle is it's more a question. Let's say you start going to you want to push that product to the mass market, then what's going to be different will be your maybe sales marketing strategy, your overall go-to.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. And we were discussing earlier before getting started with the interview that you will be traveling a lot. I've read somewhere 13 flights in 5 weeks covering Asia, Europe, and the US. What the heck are you going to do? What's the plan? What are the big objectives?
So that trip starts with a flight out to Japan. So obviously the world's sporting stages with the Rugby World Cup this year and then the Olympics in 2020 are focusing in on Japan. So we've been very honored to be selected for a program called Sports Tech Tokyo, which is kind of hand-selected 100 companies from around the world, and we're all flying in for that program to start off at the beginning of April. Then I fly back to the UK, have a day to go back and do my laundry, and then I fly straight out to the US. And then a large number of those flights are basically traveling around different states in the US. I think I have a maximum of 2 days in any one state, in any one city. Meeting with either existing clients or prospective clients and to get the face time with them and go through any product demonstrations and answer any questions, etc. Then I'm back in the UK for a little while and then heading out, again, very honoured to be chosen as a representative for the UK government on a trade mission, actually focusing on the medical applications, going out to Texas, which is, they have the Texas Medical Center, which is, I hadn't realized the other day, it's 66 different institutions on one campus. I knew it was big, but I didn't realize it was quite that big. So that's those 3 trips. I'm sure that by the end of it, I will be very jet lagged and not knowing what day of the week it is, but with any luck, I'll be able to hold my own and represent Kymira in the manner that is required of me.
Make sure you wear your own products while traveling.
I always do. I'm, people say doctors are the worst patients, but I practice what I preach.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tim. You have a great company, very nice products and technology. I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person at the Wear Innovation Summit in Berlin, June 25th and 26th. And again, thanks for your time and have lots of fun, lots of success for your upcoming travels.
Thank you. And likewise, thank you for your time. And, I look forward to meeting you too.
All right, guys, that's it for today. We hope that you enjoyed the episode. Quick reminder, we'll be at the Wearable Innovation Summit in Berlin, June 25th and 26th. This is Europe's leading conference and platform for professionals in the wearable technology business. So if you're around, please let us know. We're always happy to meet up. Also, you can get in touch with us to ask questions or give us some feedback on the podcast. You can also check us out at thestunnernow.com. Thanks a lot for listening, and have a great one.